Nukem 3D. What do I even say for an intro here? This game is one of the greatest shooters ever made, one of the titles that marked the end of the era of Doom clones and the beginning of first-person shooters as a truly distinct genre. Alongside this, it was also the first shooter outside of the id Software trifecta that really gained the same level of success, achieving great reviews, a massive fan base, all that good stuff, which established 3D Realms as the top competitor for domination of the FPS genre, at least until they got sidetracked with that thing. Controversial in both 1996 and all the way to today, I booted up the World Tour edition of the game, the one created by that dude that nobody likes, and revisited the most masculine massacre of all time. Boys and girls, we're going on a nostalgia trip for this one, and our destination is... Before I get started with the video proper, I gotta do that YouTuber thing where I tell you to go click on links in the description of this video, so go follow me on the Letter website and join my Discord server. If you do either of these things, you get exclusive access to my manifesto. I'm coming out with a second edition, and let's just say I'm about to drop a bomb, if you know what I mean. Now, Duke Nukem 3D is one of those video games that's almost pointless for me to talk about since it's so iconic and there's already a million videos on it, but I'm gonna do it anyway. This game kicks all kinds of ass. 96 was a revolutionary year for shooters. On one hand, you had Quake, the first fully 3D shooter that broke every existing technological boundary and basically set the stage for the great graphics arms race of the 2000s, and on the other hand you had Duke Nukem 3D, which was much less impressive visually but blew Quake out of the water when it came to interactivity and immersive gameplay elements. One thing that some so-called people complain about when they venture back to try out the first Doom or Quake is the abstract, often labyrinthine nature of the level design. Despite the obvious graphical breakthroughs that both of these games represented, they were still set in level with nonsensical layouts that never gave off the impression that you were in locations that were at one point inhabited by anybody. When Duke Nukem came out in 96, its main selling points were that you could interact with a shit ton of stuff in the environment and that the levels had layouts that actually somewhat resembled real places. In Doom and Quake, you'd go into a room and be like, what the fuck is this place supposed to be? In Duke Nukem, you walk into a room and you're like, hey, this looks like that place where that hooker and her pimp beat the shit out of me and stole all my money. These two elements combine to create a shooting experience that really put you in the shoes of the main character and help you to pretend that you were someone who is actually capable of attracting women. But who is this main character? Who is Duke Nukem? That's actually quite fascinating. According to the in-game lore, Daniel Nukemski, Duke of Warsaw, came to America in... Oh, fuck it. I don't have the energy to make up some dumb shit. Here's the real answer. Duke Nukem is the unholy amalgamation of tons of different movie characters, a collage that serves as a both irreverent parody of and loving homage to the mostly testosterone and sometimes estrogen-infused action movies of the 80s and 90s. For real backstory, why the fuck is spell check garbage? For his real backstory, basically at the end of Duke Nukem 2, a side-scroller for DOS, Duke defeated Dr. Proton and was returning home to watch some Oprah. I'm not fucking with you, that's what he says. On the return trip, however, he discovers that aliens are attacking Earth, who shoot down his spaceship and begin our story. Over the course of Duke Nukem 3D, you murder and maim your way through 3 base episodes, a 4th one that came out later as an expansion pack, and a 5th one that was released as part of the World Tour edition that I played through for this video, and 3 additional episodes provided by expansion packs. Oh wait, they didn't include these in the new release for some reason. On the subject of my method of playing this game, like I just said, we're doing the World Tour edition for this video. For a while, the best way to play this game was the Megaton edition, a prior remaster that I actually still have on Steam and even have installed for some reason. I have no idea why. The World Tour edition is a newer re-release that was produced by Gearbox a few years ago after they acquired the rights to the series. It adds a new renderer that I didn't use, as well as the aforementioned 5th episode, plus it boasts re-recorded voice lines from Duke's voice actor, including a new line where he says Bazinga. I didn't hear that one during this playthrough, which is a good thing because, well, let's just say that Gearbox's office is public information. I'm not morally opposed to Duke getting new voice lines that reference modern pop culture, but why the fuck would they make him say Bazinga? The whole friggin' point of his character was to parody action films, not boring sitcoms. It kind of falls in line with the Gearbox approach to humor, though, where in lieu of making actual jokes with punchlines, they just subject the player to a gigadump of every shitty meme from the last few years. On that subject, I want to talk a little bit more about our hero and why he's so great. Before anything else, I have to mention the voice actor, John St. John. You already know he did a good job because they gave him sainthood, who delivered probably one of the most iconic game performances of all time. Duke Nukem is one of those characters that I can't imagine being done by anyone other than this guy. His voice and delivery are so synonymous with the character that they'd be hard-pressed to find anyone else who could deliver a performance that's even half as good, except for that shitposting guy on Twitter, I guess. At his core, Duke Nukem is essentially a composite character, a collage if you will, this big mishmash of every iconic action movie hero from the era, guys like Dirty Harry, Snake Plissken, John Nada. Hell, that last one was even where Duke gets his most iconic line from, you know what I'm talking about, the one about kicking bubblegum and chewing ass. The paradigmatic tough guy, men want to be him, women want to be with him, and it's 2024, so you can flip both those statements around and it still makes sense. Speaking of 2024, it's a common topic of discussion about how people could reboot this franchise in the modern era, which I have my own, possibly semi-controversial, I'm not sure, take on that subject that I'll give at the end of the video. For now though, let's talk about the gameplay and let's talk about the levels. The gameplay is pretty much what you'd expect from a first-person shooter with regards to combat, though there is a pretty creative and iconic assortment of weapons here. You've got the more standard stuff like a pistol, shotgun, and chain gun, alongside some wacky shit like a shrink ray, freeze thrower, and the Devastator cannons that just obliterate everything. The enemy roster is made up of an assortment of different alien invaders, such as the standard foot soldiers, the iconic pig cops, these bastard chain gunners that I hate even more than the fuckers from Doom 2, the floaty squid guys who make ungodly noises when you shoot them. It's a pretty iconic roster and every baddie has a unique silhouette that is instantly recognizable. Shooting the guns feels good, and shooting them at living beings feels even better. There's also an assortment of items that you can pick up throughout the game, basically like the power-ups from Doom and Quake, except you can carry them in your inventory and use them as needed. The most useful one is obviously the portable medkit, since it lets you, heal, but there's also the jetpack, which you can use to take shortcuts throughout a level, the Hollow Duke to distract enemies, steroids to increase your speed, scuba gear for prolonged excursions underwater, and the protective boots for when you need to take a walk through some molten lava. That's my basic summary of the gameplay, now let's get on to the levels in this bitch. The first episode is called LA Meltdown, and before I say a single word more, we're all gonna bow our heads and pay respects to the greatest video game opening of all time.
Damn, those alien bastards are gonna pay for shooting up my gun.
I just love that. No cutscene, no exposition, nothing that even vaguely resembles the slightest of narrative ambitions on the part of the developer. You get the entire story and the main character's motivation summed up in a single sentence. I believe the award-winning screenwriters over at Reddit refer to that as script economy or something just as fucking stupid. As I often do in these videos, I feel it is relevant to take a brief excursion into some personal history with this title. See, I'm part of that micro-generation of Americans born in the mid-90s who are too young to be millennials but too old to be Zoomers, so I grew up on a lot of shooters like Halo and Call of Duty, which made heavy use of scripted cinematic set pieces and all that fancy shit. The first time I touched this game was in middle school when I saw the Megaton edition on the Xbox Live Arcade. I downloaded the free trial and gave it a shot, and that was the first thing I noticed, that immediate thrust into the gameplay with no delay. That shit was awesome. Don't get me wrong, I think there's still absolutely a place in video games for more narrative-driven stuff, but sometimes I just really want to go ahead and kill a motherfucker, you know what I mean? But enough about me, let's talk about Duke's exploits. So the first episode is set in and around the great city of Los Angeles, California. You start out the adventure journeying through various red light districts and other seedy locales that have been taken over by the A-Lamps before journeying into the desert to confront the leader of the invasion in his own ship. Like many other shooters of the period, this starting episode is probably the most iconic, and the various sleazy back alleys that you fight through in this episode are the setting that is most associated by people with the world of Duke Nukem. One of the personal standouts for me is this episode's showcase of the technical capabilities of the build engine. Like I said earlier, it's not as impressive as the Quake engine, but it was still pretty advanced for the time, with one of the key highlights being the scripted sequences of environmental destruction, like being able to blow open certain walls and this awesome part where you take down a whole building. Fuck the Frostbite engine. This is the real shit to really put a smile on the face of every kid that played with lighters in elementary school. As was stated earlier, the boss of this episode is this big extraterrestrial bitch with a minigun that you throw down with on the mothership. This fight isn't really anything super special. He's a hit scanner, so fighting him is about as much fun as trying to convey the city of Bangkok during a game of charades, but there's a big ramp in the middle of the room that you can take cover behind, so if you have basic motor skills, then this fight should be easy enough. Once you take out the leader of the strike force, you go to an orbital platform, which is the setting for episode 2. Now, among those who have played this game, it's a fairly popular opinion that this is the worst episode in the game, mostly due to the presence of the suicide drone enemies. Does calling them that get this video demonetized? Oh, fuck it, fight me IRL, YouTube studio guy. Anyway, a lot of people don't like this episode, and the prime proliferator of this opinion is a fiend known to the wider world as Civvy11, a foul being that talks about the same subject matter as me, who also makes much higher quality videos, and I'm kind of a rip-off of him. He was also the first person I followed on Twitter. I love you, Daddy Civvy, but I also hate you because you don't like this episode, and I do. Personally, I don't actually mind the bomb drones that much. They're pretty telegraphed and they don't have any other attacks. The guys that really make my ass bleed are these chain gun bastards. I already bitched about them earlier, but I'm gonna do it again. If I were Emperor of America, I would make these types of enemies illegal. They're annoying and I do not enjoy fighting them. Yes, I'm dog shit and no, I do not care. You call it a skill issue, I call it a fun issue. But that's neither here nor there nor anywhere, because other than that, I find this episode to be pretty fun, and the change in scenery keeps it feeling unique, because for the third episode, we're going back to LA, baby. Episode 3, Shrapnel City. What a badass name. We're back in the City of Angels, but we have to fight through a semi-decent part of the city now, in a series of much more industrial locales. I forgot to talk about the goddamn boss of episode 2. He's this big frog-looking guy who shoots rockets at you in the ship from Alien. Back to Shrapnel. In all honesty, I like this episode, but my biggest problem with it is that I think it has some trouble distinguishing itself from the first one, which is much more iconic, like I said. A lot of the environments that you gotta go through look very similar, but since it's a more upscale part of the city, it lacks a lot of the sleaze and grit that characterizes the starting episode and is part of the reason why it was so memorable. With that being said, you're still playing Duke Nukem 3D, so it's still a good episode. It caps off with a fight in a football field against this towering behemoth that fires Devastator rockets at you, but funnily enough, this is probably the easiest fight in the game since the arena is, well, a field, so it's not like it's hard to dodge the rockets. While Shrapnel City was the final episode of the base game, Duke 3D eventually got a bonus episode post-launch that is packaged with this remaster called The Birth. It starts off with a really fucked up cutscene that I probably can't show, and then lets you back loose against the alien menace. I'm not sure if this is a hot or cold take, but this is actually my least favorite episode in the game. I've said it before and I'll say it again, my least favorite thing in shooters is when the level design is either too cryptic, too maze-like, or both, and you just get lost and have to wander around like a douchebag wondering where the hell you're supposed to go. This episode has that. It just seemed like practically every stage here required you to figure out some dumb bullshit in order to proceed that was completely nonsensical and pretty much killed most of the pacing and momentum of the gunfights. The worst one in my opinion is the restaurant level, since it took me like 10 minutes to figure out how to get inside, which is just boring. Compare that to the prior 3 episodes where the only time I got lost was in the canyon level because I was supposed to know that painted pictures of hands on the wall are also buttons in this universe. I still wouldn't say this episode is bad though, just that it's my least favorite. You round it off with an underwater battle against the alien queen, and then Duke gives her a gyno exam with a hand grenade, and that brings this encounter to an end. But wait, there's still one more, because this remaster comes with a special new episode called Alien World Order, composed of brand new episodes made by Level Lord, one of the original designers for this game all the way back in '96. He came out of hibernation to drop a set of levels that are visually impressive, crushingly difficult, and satisfyingly violent. I don't think there's any narrative justification for this one. Duke's just going around the world shooting aliens because that's what needs to be done, and if you need any more than that, I don't know what to tell you. We're shoot first and ask questions never in this household. Pretty much all the levels here are a blast, and it feels like a really good send-off to Duke Nukem 3D with some creative design and asshole enemy placement that requires you to make use of every strategy you've developed over the course of the prior 4 episodes. Alongside the new levels, there's 2 other big additions here. First is a new weapon, the Incinerator, which is basically the freeze thrower but turned into a flamethrower. What an odd invention and quite inhumane. Good thing it's just a video game. Secondly, and remaining on the topic of pyromania, are a new enemy type called, I think, Firefly Soldiers. They're like the regular guys, except they can shrink themselves to avoid damage, and they have fire-based attacks that are annoying as fuck. They're cool, but I feel like they don't really add all that much compared to the levels and the new gun. Final boss is some lame palette swap at the Hollywood sign, who cares? So that's the rundown of the levels in the game. If you're a big-time Duke Nukem devotee, you're probably like, you fucking noob, you didn't talk about the DC levels, you didn't talk about the beach levels, you didn't talk about the Santa levels. Shut the fuck up. I know. They're not in this version. You're gonna have to get the Megaton edition if you want those. Oh wait, you can't! They delisted it! You're going to hell. Other than those expansions being absent, which I actually didn't really mind because the beach one was the one that was actually any good, that's Duke Nukem 3D. Before I wrap this up though, I want to talk about the state of the series as a whole. It's no secret to any shooter fan that Duke has been on a bit of a sabbatical for a while now. DNF was a pretty big failure that killed the studio, and the socio-political climate has changed significantly since the release of the original. It's a common sentiment in every comment section about this game that you couldn't make a new Duke Nukem in this day and age. I kind of agree. I don't think it would be impossible to make a new Duke Nukem game, but it would be difficult. Undoubtedly, the most contentious aspect of this game is its depiction of women, which is, for lack of a better term, sexist. Hold on now. hold off those comments. Don't worry, this isn't my BreadTube tryout video, and I'm not about to crank out the shitty lighting and community college theater outfits to lecture on how this game shouldn't exist and you're a piece of shit if you play it. I love this fucking game. That should be abundantly clear, and if given the option, I wouldn't change anything about how it depicts women, but I'm not going to try and argue terms here. The game treats women as objects and literal background props. They exist in this world solely to titillate Duke and the player, or serve as a set dressing that has a similar amount of significance to explosive barrels. I don't think anyone who worked on this game hates women or thinks they should stay in the kitchen or anything like that. I think the whole point of the game was to be an irreverent exaggeration of action movie tropes and be a blatant male power fantasy. I don't think it's anything that you're supposed to take very seriously, but the fact of the matter is that in this day and age, people will. This leaves us in a weird spot with regards to as like a new Duke game. If they try and tone down a lot of the game's sleazier elements, they kind of remove the whole identity of Duke Nukem. On the other hand, I don't think that means they have to stick to the exact same portrayal of women that is present in this game, or especially not the sequel. I'm sure some kind of creative writer or clever director could create a game that maintains the oversexed, terminally horny character of Duke, but does something a little more interesting with the women. Funnily enough, I think the section with the brothel in the DLC for Duke Nukem Forever actually kind of does exactly what I'm talking about. All the women in that area are still sexy, they're all strippers and shit like that, but they have actual significance in the plot and play a role in the story. They're competent, and even though he clearly wants to fuck each and every single one of them, you get the impression that Duke actually has a lot of respect for them, especially the owner lady. I think something like that would actually be a pretty good way to handle it in a new game. Or they could just go get the crack pipe and go full 2020s and make him gay. Literally just the exact same character, but now he has this insatiable lust for cocks of all kinds. Honestly, that would be so fucked up and out of left field that I would actually be kind of stoked for that. Hey, handsome, let me give you an explosion from my pipe bomb. Oh my god, I can't believe I just recorded myself saying that. Whatever, fuck it. This franchise is probably dead for good anyway, and the only reason new people are getting into it is because that Twitter guy keeps making shit posts in the Duke voice. I don't care. There's like a million mods for this game anyway. The fans are making a version of DNF that doesn't suck. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go down to the strip club and take some pictures where I hover hand strippers because women scare me and they have cooties or something. Do people still go to strip clubs, or have e-girls completely taken over everything? I'll have to do further study on this. Hey everybody, if you made it this far into the video, I just want to say thanks. It means a whole lot. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all your standard YouTube outro stuff, and a big thank you to the patrons over on Patreon: Spec Teams 1 Slingshots, Joe Sneaks, Zorio, the Gazer Patron, and Lev, as well as the members here on YouTube: Saiga, Grungles, Brigador24, and Just BW. Thanks a lot, y'all. And other than that, I'll see y'all in the next video. Goodbye.